The headlines say the economy is strong, unemployment is low, GDP is growing. The stock market keeps hitting new highs. By every traditional measure, America should be thriving. But walk into a grocery store. Try to book a doctor's appointment without a 6-week wait. Look at your rent notice. Check your credit card statement. Ask your parents if they're worried about money. Ask yourself the same question. Because there's a disconnect happening in America right now, a gap between what the official statistics say and what ordinary people are actually experiencing. The economy looks fine on paper, but millions of Americans are struggling in ways that don't show up in unemployment numbers or GDP reports. This isn't a recession. It's not a collapse. It's something more insidious. It's a slow-motion squeeze on ordinary people's finances and quality of life. And if you're paying attention, you can see it everywhere. The question is, how did we get here? And more importantly, what does it mean for your future? The promise that shaped an era to understand what's happening now, you need to understand what people were promised. In the decades after World War II, there was a basic bargain in America. Work hard, get an education, get a job, and you'd be able to afford a house, raise a family, save for retirement, and pass something down to your kids. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't theoretical. Millions of people lived this out. It worked. This bargain held for a long time. Through the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and into the 1980s, a high school diploma was enough to get a stable job that could support a family. Housing was affordable relative to income. A single earner could carry a household. Pensions existed. Benefits were solid. If you worked for the same company for 30 years, you'd retire with security. The promise seemed permanent, self-evident. This was just how America worked. But starting in the 1990s and accelerating through the 2000s, something shifted. It was gradual enough that most people didn't notice it happening in real time. But the baseline had fundamentally changed. Entry-level jobs stopped paying enough to live independently. You needed a college degree. Then you needed a specialized degree. Then you needed networking and internships. The education required to get a decent job kept expanding, and so did the cost of education. Pensions disappeared. Employers shifted the responsibility for retirement onto workers. Instead of guaranteed pensions, you got a 401k and the responsibility to manage your own investments. If the market crashed, you lost money. That was your problem now. Health insurance became increasingly expensive. Deductibles rose, co-pays increased, coverage shrank. For many workers, health insurance felt less like a benefit and more like a burden. Housing costs separated from income growth. In the 1970s and 1980s, a house cost about 3 to 4 times your annual income. By 2020, in many markets it was 8, 10, sometimes 15 times annual income. The basic math stopped working. These changes happened slowly. Each one individually seemed manageable. But cumulatively, they fundamentally altered the economic reality for ordinary Americans. The hidden squeeze nobody is talking about. Here's the thing that's hard to see because it's not dramatic or sudden. Basic expenses for ordinary Americans have exploded while wages have stagnated. Let's look at the numbers, but I'll keep them simple. In 2000, the average rent in America was about $600 a month. In 2024, it's over $1,600. That's nearly a 170% increase. But median wages over the same period increased by less than 50% when adjusted for inflation. Your money doesn't go as far. Groceries. The price of basic food has skyrocketed. A gallon of milk, eggs, chicken, fresh vegetables, everything costs more. A family's monthly grocery bill has roughly doubled in the last 5 years in many parts of the country. For families already living paycheck to paycheck, that's devastating. Healthcare. Premiums for health insurance have increased roughly 3 times faster than wages. A family health insurance plan that cost $5,000 a year in 2000 might cost $15,000 or more today. And that's before deductibles. Many people have health insurance but can't actually afford to use it because the deductibles are so high. Childcare. If you have young kids and both parents work, childcare costs can rival college tuition. In many cities, full-time childcare for an infant is $1,500 to $2,500 a month. For a single-income household or a family with modest income, that's not feasible. One parent has to stay home, reducing household income. Electricity, water, natural gas, utilities have become increasingly expensive. Car insurance, car maintenance, gas, transportation costs have risen. College education, which was supposed to be the path to better economics, now costs $100,000 to $300,000 and leaves graduates with crushing debt. Add it all up, and the cost of living has increased by 50 to 100% over the last 2 decades, while wages have increased by 20 to 30%. That gap, that squeeze, is where millions of Americans are stuck. The psychological and financial weight. Let me be specific about what this actually feels like, because the statistics don't capture the daily reality. Marcus, 44, works in construction. He makes $65,000 a year. That's decent money. That's above average for his area, but his rent is $1,800 a month. His car payment is $450. Insurance and gas are $300. That's already $2,550 just for housing, transportation, and insurance. He has 2 kids. Groceries, utilities, childcare. It's another $2,000. He's at $4,550 a month before he pays for anything else. His take-home after taxes is about $4,200 a month. He's drowning. Not in credit card debt yet, but he has no cushion. One unexpected car repair, one medical bill, one job loss, and he's in crisis. He's constantly making micro-decisions. Do I buy the cheaper food that's less healthy? Do I skip the doctor visit to save money? Do I drive less to save on gas? Do I put off that home repair? This is the stress of the squeeze. It's not dramatic. Poverty. It's financial precarity. It's knowing that you're one bad event away from everything falling apart. Then there's Sarah, 38, who works in healthcare administration. She makes $72,000 a year. She has a degree and a professional job. She should be fine, but her rent in her city is $2,200 a month. She has student loan debt from her education, $35,000 remaining on a $70,000 original debt. She's been making payments for 15 years. Her student loans are costing her $400 a month. She wants to buy a house, but houses in her market start at $400,000. At current interest rates, that's a $2,400 a month mortgage before property taxes and insurance. She can't qualify. She's trapped renting. She's in her late 30s, has a good job, did everything right, and she's further from home ownership than she was 10 years ago. The psychological weight of this is real. You did what you were supposed to do. You got educated, you got a good job, and you still can't afford basic stability. Then there's Robert, 58, a former factory worker. His plant closed in 2018. He was able to find another job, but it paid 30% less. He's got 5 years until retirement, but his savings are minimal. He picked up part-time work to try to catch up, but he's exhausted. His wife is still working, but she's terrified of what happens when he retires. Social Security alone won't be enough. They should downsize their house, but they owe more than it's worth because of refinancing during the pandemic. They're stuck. These aren't rare situations. These are the stories of millions of Americans. Why this is happening. The squeeze has multiple causes, and they're all reinforcing each other. First, there's the structural issue of housing. We covered this before. Supply is constrained, demand is high, and zoning prevents the construction of affordable housing. So housing costs keep rising while wages stagnate. Second, there's the decline of unions and worker bargaining power. In the 1950s and 1960s, about a third of American workers were in unions. Unions negotiated for wages, benefits, pensions, and job security. Today, union membership is around 10%. Without collective bargaining power, individual workers have less leverage. Employers can move jobs, outsource, or simply not raise wages, knowing workers have few alternatives. Third, there's the gig economy and the decline of full-time employment with benefits. More and more work is contractual, part-time, or freelance. Employers get flexibility, workers lose security, benefits, and predictability. You might make decent hourly rates, but you don't get health insurance, retirement matching, or paid time off. The burden shifts to the worker. Fourth, there's inflation that outpaces wage growth. Wages might increase 2 or 3% a year, but inflation spikes 6, 7, 8%. Your real purchasing power decreases. It feels like you're going backward even when you get a raise. Fifth, there's the rising cost of essential services that were once cheaper. Healthcare, education, childcare. These are increasingly privatized or underfunded. The costs shift to individuals. And because these are essential, you need healthcare, you need education for your kids, you might need childcare to work. You can't opt out. You pay whatever. It costs. Finally, there's the issue of financial fragility. Most Americans don't have adequate emergency savings. Studies show that over 50% of Americans couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency without going into debt. That means everyone is one crisis away from financial catastrophe. That creates constant low-level stress. The data that should alarm you, Pew Research, found that roughly 60% of Americans say they're struggling financially. Not destitute, not in crisis, but struggling. That's the majority of the country. The New York Federal Reserve's household debt dashboard shows that consumer debt is at an all-time high. Not just credit cards, also auto loans, student loans, medical debt. Americans are carrying more debt than ever while incomes have stagnated. CNBC survey found that nearly 40% of Americans earning $100,000 or more a year say they're living paycheck to paycheck. These aren't poor people. These are upper middle class earners, and they're financially precarious. The Brookings Institution found that economic mobility in America has stalled. If you were born poor in 1940, you had about a 90% chance of earning more than your parents. If you were born poor in 1980, you have about a 50% chance. The ability to climb the economic ladder has been cut in half in just one generation. These aren't minor statistics. They're describing a fundamental shift in how America works, economically. Why the official numbers don't match reality? Here's the thing that confuses people. The unemployment rate is low. The stock market is high. Corporate profits are strong. By traditional measures, the economy is doing well, but the unemployment rate only counts people actively looking for work. It doesn't count people who've given up looking. It doesn't measure wage quality or whether jobs have benefits. You could have two people, one with a $100,000 full-time job with benefits and one with a $30,000 part-time gig economy job with no benefits. They're both employed. The statistics count them equally. Corporate profits are strong because companies are paying workers less relative to their revenue and productivity. Workers are producing more per hour, but seeing less of the benefit. The productivity gains are flowing to shareholders, not workers. The stock market is high, but most Americans don't own significant stock holdings. The top 10% of households own about 70% of all stock. So when the market goes up, it enriches the wealthy. The average American doesn't benefit. Wages look okay on paper, but when you adjust for rising costs, especially housing, healthcare and education, real purchasing power has declined for many workers. The official statistics are measuring an economy that looks fine if you're at the top. But for the middle and working class, lived experience is very different. The surprising insight. It's a knowledge problem. Here's something you might not have considered. Many people don't realize how much trouble they're in until it's too late. Financial literacy is not something most Americans are taught. Many people don't understand compound interest, credit scores, asset allocation, or tax optimization. They're making major financial decisions, buying homes, taking on debt, investing for retirement, without fully understanding the implications. They also don't have visibility into their own financial health. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you might not realize it. You might think you're fine because you're not in debt yet. But you have no margin for error. You don't know how close to the edge you actually are. And there's a narrative problem. People still believe in the old bargain. Work hard, get educated, get a job, build a life. That narrative was true for their parents' generation. So when they're struggling, they blame themselves. I should have saved more. I should have chosen a better career. I should have been more disciplined. They don't recognize that the system itself has changed, that the bargain has been broken, that they're struggling not because they're failing, but because the rules changed mid-game. What this means going forward, if this continues, if the squeeze intensifies, if wage growth stays flat while costs rise, we're looking at long-term problems, delayed life milestones. Fewer people will get married, buy homes, or have kids because they can't afford it. This already happening. Average age of first marriage is rising. Home ownership rate among young people is declining. Birth rates are dropping, deteriorating health outcomes. Financial stress causes health problems. Delayed medical care because of costs causes problems. We could see declining life expectancy for certain demographics. Political instability. When people feel economically threatened, they vote for change. We might see increasingly polarized politics, populist movements, and radical policy shifts as people demand different systems. Brain drain. Talented people will leave. They'll move to countries with better economic mobility, better healthcare, better education. Or they'll leave the labor force and pursue gig work or early retirement if they have any savings. The country loses productivity, widening inequality. Without intervention, the gap between haves and have-nots will keep widening. That creates social tension and reduced social cohesion. What you should watch, if you're trying to understand what's coming, pay attention to these signals. First, wage. Growth versus cost of living growth. If wages start growing faster than costs, the squeeze is easing. If costs keep outpacing wages, the squeeze intensifies. Second, unemployment and underemployment rates. Official unemployment might stay low, but watch for underemployment people working part-time who want full-time jobs. Third, consumer savings rates. When people stop saving and start drawing down savings or increasing debt, that's a sign of financial stress. Fourth, credit default rates. When people start defaulting on credit cards, auto loans, and student loans, that signals financial breakdown. Fifth, major life decisions. Marriage rates, birth rates, home buying rates, education enrollment. These are leading indicators of economic confidence. Sixth, migration patterns. Are people staying where they are or moving? Are they moving to opportunity or fleeing high cost? Areas the bottom line. The American economy is growing and creating jobs and generating wealth. But that wealth is concentrating at the top. It's not reaching ordinary people. The fundamental bargain that made America work hard, play by the rules, build a stable life, is broken. This doesn't mean collapse is coming. It doesn't mean everyone is going to be poor. But it does mean that ordinary Americans face a harder squeeze than they did a generation ago. It means delayed dreams, increased stress, and reduced opportunity for upward mobility. The question is whether this becomes the permanent new normal, or whether something changes. Whether wages rise faster than costs, whether housing becomes more affordable, whether healthcare and education costs decrease, whether workers regain bargaining power. These aren't small issues. They're fundamental to what it means to be American, to have opportunity, to build a life, to believe that your kids will have better than you had. Right now, millions of Americans are quietly wondering if that's still true, and that should concern everyone.